The history of African Americans and Africans is tied not only in their genes, but also inside the way that they operate in general. If we examine all the ways that they are tied together, then we will have a video that is 300 years long. So instead, I want to watch a video that talks about the separations made by, in my opinion, bad actors that wish to cause a rift or to sunder the worlds of Africa and the African Americans for no reason at all. This is not coming from one side, of course. Both some, I would say, very wealthy Africans and some very wealthy African Americans have their ways of how they evaluate these people and then speak for the majority of the population who truly don't have a voice and, in the most part, do not have an opinion on the other, but will always have some kind of influence, not only through art, science, struggle, upliftment, civilization creation, and history, but in every way possible. We shall look at some of the greatest places in Africa and in the African American areas and how, bringing multiple people together, they stood up against Europeans. And because they did this, the thing that the Europeans realized was important was to separate these people because together they became too powerful. And so let us watch this video, which, in my opinion, is born from the strategies of divide and conquer created by Eurocentrists, especially since the very people on both sides that contribute to this division use Eurocentric markers as their way to downplay the other.
Peace, family. It's your brother Chase back at you again with another reactionary video. And check out, man. Today we got another angry African woman this time going off on foundational Black Americans in general, calling us all type of foul things. And we're going to react to it. We're going to break it down from a non-emotional standpoint.
So to start off, we shall start with the fact that this video begins with this individual talking about the fact that there will be an African female who, in my opinion, definitely does not represent the common or popular opinion in Africa about African Americans. But we shall see exactly what they get into and how they either agree or disagree.
So that our babies at home, when they run across these talking points, they know how to deal with it. Because that's what matters, family. So make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. And with that being said, let's get right into the video.
So let us start by talking first and foremost about the types of people that we're talking about here. If you see right in the middle, you can see Africa, and then you can also see in pink, North America. Now, Black Americans or African Americans are found in the Americas. Africans are found in Africa. Some Africans who wish to migrate have migrated to the Americas, and some much smaller population of African Americans have migrated into Africa when they wanted to migrate. But outside of these very small migrations, there is really no overlap physically between these two people. You would think they would have little to nothing to say about each other negative, given the fact that the only way they would get to each other is if they journeyed far and wide, and the similarities you would think would bring them together. Now, this is absolutely true for the most part because African Americans and Africans have been working together forever since they could, and Africans and South American blacks and others of the islands in the Americas and Europe and the Middle East, and including the oceanic regions, have been working together. But again, every group has fights, and some of these are stoked by some, as I say, bad actors. And these bad actors pretend to speak for the entire group, just like how if I pick just about any right winger who says damning things about Africa, calling Africans savages and stuff. I can pick out any one individual and then say this is what Americans think of Africans. I could, of course, in the very same way, pick any random black right winger and use them as evidence that, oh, look, African Americans don't even like themselves. But this would be selection bias. Instead, I point to specific people, and no matter how much they try to speak for other people, I can easily go, no, that is your opinion. And you're trying to spread it across as if it is the opinion of all the people living there. And that is how you attack it. Even if they say we as African Americans look down on the Africans, I still go, no, you look down on them. And now you're trying to blame an entire group because you want to defend your ideas through a bigger lens because you standing alone would leave you vulnerable.
Black Americans, please leave Africans out. I really hope this lands because I'm sick and tired of seeing this conversation on FYP. There was a time you guys were arguing that Africans say that you guys are not African enough. That was also a problem. Now you don't want to be African. It is okay. I promise you, none of us calls you African American.
So, since he gives no commentary in that introduction, I think it is important for me to give a little bit of context and to rebut what she is saying. So, firstly, she says African Americans, leave us alone. So, this is obviously because there's some kind of fight on some other platform. This does not look like a YouTube thing between African Americans and Africans in general. I don't even want to get into why they're fighting, which seems, again, if you look at the distances between these two areas, you do not understand why there would be a fight. But let's first talk about the fact that the population of Africa is 1.5 billion, some of which do not even speak the English language. They speak 2 or 3 languages in average in Africa, and some of those might not even include English. For a large population, it could be Arabic, French, Portuguese, and sometimes just nothing but African languages. So, what this girl is saying has almost nothing to do with the entire continent. This is her personal opinion, and obviously, I don't agree with it at all. The other one is the term African American, which for most people, I sometimes find it confusing because people think that being part of the African diaspora is like a choice, which is it's not. If you go anywhere around the world, you will be treated as if you are an African if you are from an African American background. As I watched some on NDTV where an African American who was very light skinned and was in India was categorized as Nigerian, which is what they're going to do in any place. So there is no separation. It's not a choice. If you look like a black person, you will be treated like a black person. So this idea that some people don't look at them as real Africans, that is not going to happen. A lot of Africans, black Africans as well, are mixed in with African Americans in countries like Thailand and places like that. And so there is no true separation. It's not a choice. And then, of course, this idea of not being African enough. See, the problem with this idea is that a lot of people who have been speaking about who are the real Africans and all of that, every part of Africa has problems with the separation thing. It's a Eurocentric thing. It's not a separation between African Americans and Africans themselves. The Eurocentrists have been playing at this game for a long time, including using other groups like people from the Middle East to further separate. For example, we know that about the sub-Saharan African term, which is used for separation between North Africans and sub-Saharan Africans, quote unquote. And then, of course, it doesn't even stop there. We've got the smaller separations between the North Sudanese and the South Sudanese. And then it goes even further where you have Ethiopians who, for a while, claimed not to be part of the black race, despite the fact that their term Ethiopian comes from one of the earliest words to describe black people. Then, of course, you have people who are claiming that the Khoisan were not part of the black race. Then you have people talking about West Africans as being completely different than the rest of the Africans, meaning that they are heartland Africans or equatorial Africans, different than the rest, being a true black people. But these have always just been used for division. One of the things that Africans realized was that they had to come together. Now, I'm not even gonna lie, it's true. There is a separation which is being fueled by Eurocentrists who are using Africans like these to try and cause the separation because they will lose if the diaspora of Africa comes together. I could easily play you videos of stereotypes about Nigerians being utilized by people from India, Europe, Africa, and also in the Americas, because these places, they too have ears and they too utilize the same stereotypes that Eurocentrists would use to describe these people.
The entire Africa calls you guys Black American. We don't think you're African Americans. We don't even think you're African. You guys are so different from you.
So obviously some context is lost from what she is saying because she's highly edited the video. But if I take what I heard, she says African Americans are very different than the rest of Africans, which is true, but Africans are very different from one another too. I mean, someone from Nigeria's culture, especially in the modern world, is fairly different than that of people in South Africa or those in Ethiopia. Some of these places have very different religions, very different customs. The olden days of ancestral worship have kind of stayed, but only in a specific sort of way. Yes, the histories and the cultural under areas of the culture have remained, but these have also remained within the African American cultures, which is something I will address later.
Don't stop the cap, man. These folks stay sitting up here capping, family. They try to Africanize everything we damn do. She's on here making this video now because she's upset that foundational Black Americans are delineating. They always say, oh, nigga, we don't care what you do. We don't care what you do, nigga. Then every time we say, oh, okay, we're just Black Americans. We have our own culture. No, nigga, you are African. You got that from Africa. Then they get over here and, oh, we don't care what you do. These folks are delusional, family. They're delusional.
So there's a couple of things to address over there. First of all, let's just address the N-word being used, which, the types of Africans that you're talking about are, again, of a different ilk, because the N-word, which is still used in Africa to downplay or to degrade Black Africans, is not exactly something that somebody who knows anything about Africa would use. I mean, go and look it up on the news. There are plenty of white people who get into deep trouble for using the N-word. I mean, they've been using it since the apartheid era, and in other parts of Africa, the colonization era. And so the people who would say that, I don't even understand where they're coming from, because that word applies to just about every single Black person on earth. Now, as far as delineating, first of all, they are delineated. There are very specific different culture in a way in the African American areas, even though they do come foundationally from other Africans. they do have their own specific culture. It seems to me that the thing that is quote unquote making her mad, it seems like she's the one trying to make people mad, but the thing that's quote unquote making her mad is less the delineation and more the back and forth that she's had with specific types of people who have told her that they don't consider themselves part of those Africans over there. And God knows what they said to her, but I don't even want to go into that perspective.
Okay, let's be clear.
Don't have manners. We have manners. And what culture are you talking about that Africa?
I know she didn't say something about manners.
By the way, for anybody who was confused and thought these are independent thoughts of hers, you can tell by this that she's just repeating Eurocentrist ideals and saying things that they would. This is not one person, of course. You've got Modi Speaks, who I've reacted to. You've got the Hodge twins. You've got all these other people who come from all parts of the world. Black people who come from all parts of the world. And they basically make money off of making fun of black people from across the world. I mean, I know some people think that it's African American focused, but this one is African American focused. But a lot of these people, what they do, because of course it's very financially lucrative to downgrade a group of people that the entire world basically has a agenda against.
Oh Lord, hold on, family. Hold on. Let me play that back. I missed that part. Let me play that back.
You guys, Black American, we don't think you're African Americans. We don't even think you're African. You guys are so different from. You don't have manners. We have manners. And
ma'am, oh Lord. You might have to send the kids out the room on it. Let me go ahead and I see now we're gonna have to take the gloves off because I see this woman is talking crazy, but
I'm waiting for his response. And of course, I hope that it's measured because, of course, this woman is going off on what I would say is an evil rant. But let us see in what direction this will head.
The days of us letting them slide talking like this, those days are over. Manners, ma'am, you don't want to talk about manners. Family, they're sitting up there. They got all type of polluted rivers in Africa because they didn't throw so much trash and they got so much feces in it. They over there taking dumps in the river. I'm not lying, family. The scamming runs rampant over there in Africa. They got whole scams that were named and pioneered by Africans. You dig? They got the whole Nigerian prince scam. Some of these countries are known for straight up and down scamming people.
That escalated very fast. Of course, she started it, but the people who are being attacked here are not exactly comparable to the person doing the attacking. So, yes, it is true that, like many countries with a lot of poverty in Africa, there's a lot of pollutants. Of course, we could talk about, but I don't want to do tit for tat. We could talk about how some places in America too are polluted. We could also talk about how some of those people living by rivers don't really live in cities or anything like that. But we don't even need to get deep into that. Again, for me, it's not a America versus Africa type of thing. But let's not even talk about scams because the number one countries that do scams, first of all, the number one countries that do scams are America, Europe, and Asia. Those continents dominate in scams. Africans aren't even in the privileged position where they could carry out a lot of these scams. As he mentions, Nigerians, but that is one corner of it, and a lot of it is a romance scam. You have plenty of scams. If you look them up online, you will be shocked by what you see. You've got sextortion, you've got the romance scams, you've got malware, you've got spyware, you've got all kinds of things that have been done all over the Americas, I mean, the first world countries, in order to exploit this, of course, not coming from the individuals themselves. It has nothing to do with African Americans or Africans. It's done by people who have malicious intent. I mean, you have malicious wear as well. But for me, this does not brush good people with this. Again, these are bad people doing bad things in order to do whatever they want. And of course, there is no excuse for doing bad things. But the difference between a lot of the places that they're doing them in Africa and a lot of the places that they're doing them in these first world countries is that the people in those first world countries are trying to be rich, while the people in the third world countries are trying to escape poverty by doing whatever. Now, of course, Africa can be exploited in more ways than one. One of the ways that Africans are exploited, because of course they want to have a lot of money, is that a lot of their ID numbers get stolen and utilized by people in first world countries in order to fraudulently create bank accounts in which they can scam other people and do all kinds of things like that. These are done by offering modeling jobs, real jobs, maid jobs. All you need to do is just send your ID. These are in large numbers. Now, of course, I could easily point out the ills of directing your attention to specific crimes done by a very small population in a country and then painting the entire country that way. And, I mean, you can take African Americans and how some people around the world will basically stereotype them as gangbangers and murderers and all of these other things that you see. I mean, Africans, we've got the same stereotypes as like warlords, or the same thing that he was talking about. Everybody just throws litter in the river and all these things. But again, these are Eurocentric tropes which are used to divide the African continent. And of course, this woman who's doing this is bad, but I think doing it back is just as awful, especially since you're probably attacking people who, I mean, one thing he said was that Africans don't care about African Americans for the most part, and he said it as if it was like a degrading thing, and the answer is of course they don't. They're more concerned about what's happening in their particular neighborhoods and trying to fix that stuff. Africans who use the N word. I haven't heard the N word in Africa used by Africans in like 15 years. Now, I've never heard it being used as like a negative towards African Americans.
We don't have manners. We don't have manners. Y'all sitting over there with some of the highest levels of paternity fraud. Yes, women like you running around Africa having babies. You don't know who the child's father is, so you pin it on the prince. Y'all.
So there are a lot of things that we have to be careful about citing in this world. For example, one of the highest two places in the world that have been cited for paternity fraud is Jamaica and Nigeria. These two places happen to gather a lot of statistics when it comes to these. And so some people take that to mean that they're the highest. But of course, there are some countries that don't take things very well or don't take data very well. So they are not even in the running of where is the biggest or not the biggest. Now, to be honest, if we compare the Americas, there too seems to be a problem. So in the Nigeria one, you could see that it was about 30%, which was paternity fraud. If we read this about America, paternity fraud refers to the misattribution by a mother of the identity of a child's father. Paternity fraud is a big problem in the United States. Some studies estimate that as many as 30% of births are attributed to the wrong father, who is forced to pay years of child support for a child who is not his. So as you can see, which to me, it's not tit for tat, they're right there with the highest. But these statistics, you have to be careful when they're not of something very deliberate, especially done by the government. This reminds me of an episode of In God For You We Trust when they were talking about the most racist countries, where there was surveys done around the world, and they concluded that most of the racist countries were somewhere in Asia, South America, and some very small places in Europe. In this list, they had all kinds of names, like Iran, for example. The next one they had was Belarus, then Bahrain, and then, of course, they had Myanmar, and all of these were gathered from statistics. South Korea, El Salvador, Colombia or Cambodia, Romania, Azerbaijan, Israel. So, of course, I'm not claiming that any of these are not based on some realistic ideal of data collection, but you notice there that there are no real Western countries like the United States, which is easily one of the most racist countries around today. By the way, South Korea being on that list is probably one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. Is there racism in South Korea? Absolutely. But to put it on the top 10 list in the world is one of the most ridiculous things ever. They concluded in that episode that that list was probably done by some Eurocentrists who diverted attention from their countries. Even the methods that are used are probably not as solid as you would like. This is why you have to be careful.
I'll be over there pinning it on the prince. This is his baby. This is his baby. Okay? Y'all be running around there lying on niggas.
Again, the paternity thing is ridiculous because, of course, the United States is right there. And I don't even want to go into the racial breakdown when they go to the United States, which race they tend to blame for the paternity scams, because, again, I'm not petty. I'm not trying to get anything on it. Again, a lot of countries, they don't even test that well for that. I mean, pick any African country. You think some of the statistics in some of those places are accurate? A lot of these are estimations. I mean, even when I looked at the Nigerian ones, they put it at 17%, not 30%.
The paternity fraud runs rampant, okay? Y'all sitting up there eating all type of bush meat, messing up the ecosystem.
Okay, so there's a lot over here to address. First of all, I don't know what bush meat is, but I'm going to assume that it's meat that comes from the bush, which is, I don't know how that's messing up the ecosystem, considering the fact that most meat in history used to come from the bushes, but let's leave that part alone. Secondly, most Africans either get their meat directly from farms, which they have themselves, or they get it from shops. So I don't know what this means that y'all eating bushmeat. There's a very small population of people still go hunting. Do you think let's take the poorest people, do you think that it's even a good idea for them to go hunting over taking a couple cents and going to buy some meat?
They got ecosystem reports out there in Africa talking about how they're trying to ban eating bushmeat. Y'all done ate all the damn animals that keep the ecosystem balanced.
So based on the information that he's provided, the quote unquote bushmeat trade of those people is nowhere near the reason why there is an imbalance within the populations that exist inside of Zambia, for example. I don't know why Zambia is being attacked. It seems like this girl, because she mentioned Africa, now every single country is being attacked in Africa, but that's fine. And of course, this is nowhere near the real trade that is responsible for the depletion of animals within Africa is those of first world countries that target Africans through poaching. Of course, we can read here, based in Zambia, WCP plays a crucial role in the global fight against wildlife and environmental crimes, the trafficking of illegal wildlife products and illegal timber trade constitute serious organized crime conducted by networks operating across the borders in the southern African regions. Wildlife and environmental crime is now estimated to be worth over $1 trillion, with governments from wildlife source countries losing between 7 billion and 12 billion, according to the World Bank in 2029. This trafficking significantly detrimentally impacts the biodiversity, the ecosystems, and the security of the affected communities. Zambia, surrounded by 8 countries with porous borders, is both a source country for wildlife products and timber and a major trade route for a wide range of illegal contraband. However, Zambia's geographic location also provides several opportunities which WCP has capitalized on by building relationships and networks with organizations and individuals working to combat illegal wildlife trade throughout the entire criminal process in Zambia and regionally across Africa. Now, I think you'll be less than surprised to find out that this is part of a greater global market, a dark market globally, which, of course, if you're talking about $1 trillion in money, you're not talking about just internally in Africa, because Zambia definitely doesn't have $1 trillion.
Y'all eating the possums, the turtles, the manners. If you don't knock it off, you don't even want to go there, ma'am. You don't.
Well, I don't know what eating possums has to do with anything, but I will have to say that we know that internationally, a lot of strange animals make it into the dinner tables of people from around the world, including the United States, which has one of the highest amounts of purchases of African illegal animals, things like pangolins, things like rhinoceros horns. We're talking about huge global markets here. Of course, we've got China and we've got many other places as well. So this idea that it's just a bunch of Africans eating possums I don't know where that comes from.
Y'all don't even want to go there, and I'm just scratching the surface. I'm really being nice right now. Y'all need to knock it off. Let's continue.
Well, if that's being nice, then I guess, I don't know what nice means. The attacks, I would say most of them fall flat to some degree because, one, yes, of course, there's polluted rivers, but I don't want to do tit for tat, but is there no pollution in America? Not to mention that one of the greatest world crises, global warming, is who's contributed to it the most. I don't know. Let's carry on. What I want to say is less than that. I don't even care about that tit for tat, to be honest, but less than that, these accusations of, first of all, paternity fraud being so high, but then somewhere in America, especially in specific communities, it being low, no, that again falls flat. But this has nothing to do with anything. This is just a division tactic.
What culture are you talking about that Africans steal from you? That's the funniest bit I've heard. What culture? They're not like us. You're not like us. We're not like you. Is that your culture?
So, of course, on this channel, I've focused on African culture and African American culture and how they have poured into each other for really hundreds of years at this point. And it wasn't just through slavery. There was also certain types of people who went willingly and poured a lot of their culture, even being hired by some of the most prominent Black American figures, which we'll get into later, hopefully, if they start to talk about culture in a deeper way than just in these vague terms of like Africa this, and then they start mentioning negative stuff about each other's countries, which is sad, to be honest, which makes it easier for white supremacists to come in and start pointing on both sides and be like, look, they can't even get along with each other and they want us to get along with them.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That is part of our culture. She asked what culture and then turned around and started rapping / singing our culture.
To be fair, I think she was trying to mock the song, which I think it's a good song. I mean, I don't like the implications underneath it, but it was a great song, just like a lot of African American songs are awesome songs. But from her point of view, obviously, she was just trying to mock it.
These folks have another level of delusion. And that shows you how contagious, that shows you how influential it is. Even people like her, who are grade A haters, will sit up here and ask dumbass questions like what culture while rapping our culture. She couldn't even muster up enough intellectual ability to think of something different to say. She had to go to our culture to try to diss us. She's trying to diss our culture with our cultural song.
Yeah, he misunderstood what she was saying. She was saying your culture is that music, and she was not saying it in a good way. She was definitely not. She was not saying you're not like us and we're not like you. That's not what she was doing.
Okay, and she's not even in America. That shows you our influence. They've been playing that song on repeat around the world, family.
And yes, they have been playing that and many American songs, as well as African songs. We all know the influence of African music since the very beginning. But, maybe we can get deeper into it if they start bringing up the type of information. This is one of the things about a lot of these discussions is that they're always staying surface level.
These folks are delusional, though. I told you, these folks are delusional. Let's continue.
So I hope when he says these folks are delusional, that he means that people like her are delusional. I hope he doesn't mean the entire African country is filled with people who are delusional, because that would be just false off the face of it.
Africa has 54 countries and we have over 1 billion tribes. Each tribe is attached to tradition and norms. We do culture things that you don't even have. For example, I am a Muganda from Uganda. That's my tribe. And we have Buganda things that we do in our Buganda kingdom. We have the Basoga, the Banyankole. Do you even know what that is?
No.
So, of course, she brings up specific tribes, the Buganda, and the smaller groups within those groups. And she uses that as an attack on the idea that African Americans aren't further split into smaller tribes, which have been around for, tens of thousands of years. But again, this to me is petty and has nothing to do with anything. Clearly, people can organize in several ways, and tribes is only one of them. If you take some places in Africa, they were not in tribes, rather they were in much bigger linguistic states, right? Like, for example, if you take the Lunda and people like that, and how they connect with the Zulus and stuff like that. So this is not an important thing to me. And yes, he says no, he's not familiar with his tribe, which of course a lot of people aren't, because it's small tribe in comparison to many. But of course, if you ask, like, are people familiar with the Zulu tribe or something like that, a lot of people are.
No. Family, let me know in the comment section. Do you know what the Baganda tribe is? Have y'all ever heard of the Baganda tribe? What she say? The Baganda people from Uganda. Boy, they original as hell with these names, ain't they?
So let me first address that part, because it's I think people need to know. So the word Baganda comes from the Baganda tribe. The name Uganda comes from the Baganda tribe. It's not that they're not unique with the names. Of course, people in areas are going to come up with those specific names. There's tens of tribes that exist within that same region, and they could have chosen any name, and they could have chose hundreds of names, but they went to the major tribe, which is usually just like how China is after the Chinese, India is after the Indians, Australia is after the Australians. That's just how place names go.
The Baganda people from Uganda. We don't know what that is, ma'am. We don't know who y'all are. We damn near don't know where y'all located. And we most importantly don't know anything of significance that you have done.
Which is a problem of education. So, of course, the Baganda tribe have done many things in their history, and there are people who come from that area of Uganda who have gone to places like America, like Africa, like the Middle East, and all kinds of places and contributed heavily, but obviously they've been overlooked. And so, because Africans have been overlooked in general, you probably have no idea about their contributions to the world, which is not a good thing. It speaks to the education system and how Africans have been portrayed around the world. Of course, one of the most important things they did was free themselves from Great Britain. Traditionally, of course, there was the monarchy with the traditional kingdoms, Ankole, Buganda, Bunyoro, and the Toro receiving federal status and a degree of autonomy. Buganda, under the leadership of Sir Edward Mutesa, was the most powerful kingdom. Milton Obote, the leader of the Socialist Uganda People's Congress, UPC, became the first prime minister of the newly independent Uganda in 1963. Uganda became the Republic of Uganda with Mutesa II primarily as first, blah, blah, blah. Now, probably another figure that everybody knows from around the world is Idi Amin and a lot of other characters, but they wouldn't be able to place them necessarily in Uganda.
We don't. And we shouldn't be ashamed of that, family. That's not a shame, because guess what? Most of the world, I bet you 95% of the world don't know who the hell y'all are.
Well, 95% of the world doesn't know most tribes that exist in the world. I mean, if you're speaking of tribes, if you're speaking of entire populations like Africans or East Africans or anything like that, I'm pretty sure most of the world knows exactly who those people are. But if you're talking about that specific tribe, I mean, name me 3 tribes from Japan, name me 3 tribes from America, name me 3 tribes from Mexico, anywhere. Tribes are not relatively well known outside. And also, I don't think that's her point, that they're well known, therefore they've done things of significance. I mean, we know all kinds of people who are not well known, including in African American communities, where people have done all kinds of things, but they're not well known. Well known is not a indicator that you have contributed a lot to society. Otherwise, I mean, everybody knows what England, France, Spain, Sweden, any of these countries are. Therefore, we have to then say that those are the most contributing countries in the world because, we know who they are. Japan.
Hell, I bet you most people on the continent of Africa don't know who y'all are, family. You dig? Nobody knows you. Don't feel ashamed, foundational Black Americans. These folks love to try to shame us of not knowing who their tribe is.
Okay, this is going all kinds of directions. No, I don't think people should be ashamed that they don't know somebody else's tribe. And of course, the tribe's issues belong to the tribe. So the tribe should be more concerned about who they are than the rest of the world. So I'm starting to lose the plot here. What's the point of this?
Oh, nigga, do you know what a tribe is? Do you know I'm from the Baganda people? Do you know what that is? No.
Well, I haven't heard her once say the N-word, so I don't know where that level of I don't even want to call it that, but that level of attack is coming from. It's probably coming from internally, and I think most people from around the world know that word is not going to work coming from another Black person. It's kind of I don't know, maybe it's to trigger something, but it's not going to work. If this woman went anywhere really and a white person called her that word, we know that she's going to suffer the same consequences and be offended just like anybody else. So this idea that there's like a separation, the N-word, and that line of attack is unnecessary in my opinion.
And we don't care to know what it is. You're not culturally relevant enough. You dig? What is that doing for us? Nobody knows who y'all are, family. Stop it. Stop it. Don't let these folks shame you into not knowing their insignificant ass tribe.
So again, this is going into depths that I didn't even understand. So her point in the beginning, of course, was that they have tribes, and what she was trying to say is, and I don't even agree with this, but what she was trying to say is that she can go deep into her tribal roots and pick out exact historical ties to exact specific things and blah blah blah. And there was no real competition about how famous the group is. As she mentioned, I mean, she's incorrect about the number, but she was being exaggerating. Over 1 billion tribes. There's a bunch of tribes, hundreds of tribes in Africa. So I don't think she expects anyone to know every single one of them.
Don't let them play that game, family. Okay, matter of fact, I feel petty today. Let's ask ChatGPT. Because they might say, Chase, you're biased. Everybody knows who the Bagandan tribe is. Let's ask ChatGPT, family. What percentage of the world knows who the Bagandan tribe is? Because maybe it's just us dumb foundational Black Americans.
So since he's going down this direction, I guess I have to just address what he's saying. Again, everybody knows that almost nobody knows who the Baganda tribe are, which again is not a good thing. The fact that people don't know about these tribes in Africa that have contributed to the world, as one of the Russian quote unquote propaganda movies once stated, every single culture in the world has contributed heavily to the modern world. I mean, I know some people think their cultures have contributed more than anybody else's, but this is probably not true.
Let's ask ChatGPT. Okay, family, as you can see, I said, what percentage of people on Earth do you think have ever heard of the Bagandan tribe from Uganda? Okay, let me say it again. This is what I just put in ChatGPT. I said, what percentage of people on Earth do you think have ever heard of the Bagandan tribe from Uganda? This is her tribe. Let's see what chat says.
Okay, answers on the board. Everybody make your guesses. I'm going to guess almost nobody knows what that is. I'm also going to guess that almost nobody knows any tribes around the world. Of course, if we expand it to the Zulu tribe, it's going to get a lot different. But again, that's neither here nor there.
Because we got to be we can't be biased. Maybe we're just the dumb ones. Okay, let's see what ChatGPT said. All right. Chat said it's difficult to give an exact percentage, but based on global awareness levels, historical presence in international media and educational exposure, less than 1% of the global population has likely heard of the Bagandan tribe from Uganda. Oh, Lord. Okay. Then it started giving some more explanations.
As entertaining as that exercise was, I don't know exactly what it proves. Does it prove that small tribes don't exactly have the type of media that large population groups have? I mean, if you want to type something, since it was a thing about Africa and African Americans, why don't you type how many people have heard of Africans?
Let's okay, hold on, family. Let's try it with foundational Black Americans. Okay, let's say Black Americans. What percentage of people on Earth have heard of our tribe?
So this is getting a little bit silly, but let's go into it. So he's going to now make the comparison. Now, obviously, he's not going to type in what number of people have heard of foundational Black Americans, because the numbers are going to dwindle. But if he asks Black Americans, which, by the way, is not a tribe, it's a population. A tribe would be something way smaller than that. But let him do it so that I can make my own comparisons.
All right, as you can see, said family, I said, what percentage of people on Earth do you think have ever heard of Black Americans? This is ChatGPT, okay? Let's see what chat gives us. Oh, Lord. An estimated 60 to 75% of the world's population has likely heard of Black Americans.
Okay, since we're playing the game of populations, let's try it another way. So I typed in, what population of the world has heard of Africans? African Americans, 69%, right? So what population of the world has heard of Africans? So, first, it says there is no survey that literally asks, have you ever heard of Africans? Because the idea is so basic and widespread that the pollsters usually assume near universal awareness. Here's what we can say with confidence: global population, 8.1 billion, blah, 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 blah. That means the percentage of people who have ever heard of Africans is realistically very close to 100% of the world's literate and media exposed population. The only exception would be very young children or isolated groups with no exposure. So, comparing African Americans, an entire population of people, not a tribe, to a very small tribe is ridiculous. But if you compare two large populations, right, African Americans versus Africans, clearly by 40%, based on what he showed, there is a difference that everybody in the world has heard of Africans. Now you're probably thinking, where is the difference? Why is there a difference between Black Americans and Africans? Well, the answer is because every single country interacts with Black Africans, from the Middle East to everywhere, whereas not every single country interacts with African Americans, which to me, I love African American culture. I love African Americans. I love everything about African Americans. I think it's just an offshoot of African culture. I would include that in the statistic, but it's obviously not included in here. There's people who don't even speak English, and so the African American history or anything is irrelevant to them. Whereas Africans who speak multiple languages, including the ones like Chinese and stuff, are known the world over. Again, it's not a competition. To me, this is just illustrating what is happening back and forth. Now, I don't play those games, the little games of trying to do word snaps, trying to compare tribe to an entire population, which is ridiculous. But, that's just what it is. And of course, I'm pretty sure this is going to go into the influences of both of these people, which I think some people significantly downplay the contributions of Africa because they don't know much about how much Africans have gone to other countries and contributed heavily.
Though the levels of understanding varies greatly. 75, damn it. 43 million of us foundational Black Americans, and 75% of the whole damn world has heard of us.
Yep, and 1.5 billion Africans and 100% of the world has heard of us.
That lets you know where that jealousy, that hatred, and contempt comes from, family.
The jealousy, hatred, and contempt from the Baganda tribe? Or do you mean Africans in general? Because I've just shown that Africans are more well known around the world than African Americans, which again has got nothing to do with anything, in my opinion. Like, who cares? But, if you mean the Baganda tribe, I mean, I'm assuming that most people in the Baganda tribe really don't care about African Americans and how they're well known or anything like that. I'm guessing they're just trying to live like anybody else. And I'm guessing most African Americans don't care either. I don't think most African Americans are sitting there doing. By the way, you did see that sneakiness there where he didn't put how many people have heard of foundational Black Americans, which I put into the ChatGPT, but I don't want to be petty. Almost no one has heard of that term. It's likely a new term created by certain people, but I'm not even going to throw a value system to that word.
They don't want to play this whole game of tribe versus tribe.
I definitely don't want to play the game of tribe versus tribe. But of course, if we were just going to compare, the most famous tribe in Africa is probably the Zulu tribe, with estimates from ChatGPT, since you were fond of using that, saying about 25% of the world, or 2 billion people out of 8.1 billion people, have heard of the Zulu tribe. Now, that's a real tribe, by the way. It's a tribe, meaning they not only share customs in a tight knit area, but they are in a specific location. Believe it or not, you can't be a tribe if you're scattered. beyond things. So Zulus who are in Zimbabwe are not in the same tribe as Zulus in the Zulu region, which is why today it's more of a language group than a tribe. But people have heard of the Zulu tribe, which is really gone for the most part.
We would wipe the floor with them. And hold on, I feel like being petty. Let's see what chat says. I wonder who is more known on the continent of Africa. Let's go to their continent. Okay, family, I said, who is more known on the continent of Africa? Black Americans or the Bugandan tribe from Uganda? Again, this is ChatGPT. This is Aunt Chase talking. Okay, this is ChatGPT.
So again, let's do a different type of comparison where we say use the words that they use. Because of course, Black Americans can include people who are not quote unquote foundational Black Americans. So let's use the Americas. So in the Americas, what quote unquote tribe is more well known between the Buganda and foundational Black Americans? As you can see, even though the Buganda tribe is less, it's only by 7%, about 1 to 3% of the general population in the Americas knows what the Buganda tribe is, and about 5 to 10% of the people know what a foundational Black American is. And this is in America. So now that we've done that exercise, I don't know what that proves.
ChatGPT said Black Americans are far more widely known across the continent of Africa than the Bugandan tribe. Oh, Lord.
So again, this proves nothing to me. Like I said, Trevor Noah, who's from South Africa, would count as an African American or a Black American in America. So that's not the same tribe that he's talking about. The tribe that he keeps bringing up is foundational Black Americans. So let's compare foundational Black Americans in Africa. So inside of Africa, their tribe, the foundational Black Americans, who is more well known? Between the Buganda, which is in Africa known, about 15 to 20% of Africans know what a Bugandan is, and the foundational Black Americans, which according to here is probably less than 1% of Africans know what a foundational Black American is. Now, of course, we want to expand the word and just be like Black Americans, but then we can expand the word of Buganda tribe and just say East Africans. I think you know what the numbers are going to be. Like, how many people in Africa have heard of East Africans? Or how many people around the world have heard of East Africans?
If you don't stop it, ma'am.
Fine.
If you don't stop it, if you don't knock it off, we will wipe the floor with y'all. All right, we're going to start doing these head-to-head comparisons. Nobody knows y'all. This whole thing, you trying to pull some rank because you come from a damn African tribe. Ma'am, our tribe and our ethnogenesis was rooted in resistance.
So to be fair, the Ugandans as well is also rooted in resistance, but it's actually rooted in more than that. It's rooted in a long history of trade with the Middle East, the West, other African nations, including Egypt. So, again, it's not a competition. I mean, I know she kind of started it, but he's reacting to it. So I can't defend one side because I'm on neither side, to be honest.
Rooted in culture, rooted in of knowledge of self, of heritage, of innovation. And this is why Black Americans, we're known around the world, ma'am. And that's what bites you in your ass.
Africans are also known around the world at a much larger rate, by the way. But again, who cares? I mean, in my opinion, African Americans, again, are just another section. I mean, I also would include their Afro-Brazilians. That's another one that, showed that Africa has some of the best culture in the world. Jamaicans, pick your pick. I'm going to say this one right. Tobago, that one as well.
That's what bites y'all in your ass. When around us trying to pull rank, talking about what tribe you from, and the first thing we say is who? Where? Boy, that hurts them. But let's continue, because I got a feeling she's not done cooking herself.
You know, since he's doing this, I'm actually kind of curious. I mean, I hate ChatGPT because it's so addictive and also gives you inaccurate information and you carry it around like it's real information. But I'm curious what they say is more known between the Zulu tribe and foundational Black Americans. And it's pretty clear that here they say within African Americans um, and other types of Americans, the Zulu tribe, or well, they don't give for the Zulu tribe, but for the foundational Black Americans, about 20% of African Americans have heard of that, what that is, which is fine. But the overall Americans, 5%, less than 5% is aware of what it is, about 50 million people. Whereas the Zulus, the Zulu tribe in the Americas, is about 30 to 35% awareness, plus minus, and about 320 to 370 million people know what the Zulu tribe is.
Culture. What culture do we copy? Do you even have culture? If I ask you what's your tribe in Black America, like what's your tribe? Do you even know what that is? Give me Lord. 3 culture norms that you have or traditions that you do. Nothing. Y'all are gonna tell me the hoop earrings, the hip hop music. They're not like us. You're not like us. What else?
Boy, she keep going back to that song, don't she, family? Our culture lives rent free in her head. But
so obviously everything that she said is disappointingly inaccurate. And you know, like, do African Americans have a culture? Duh. Everybody's got a culture. First of all, to have a to be human means you have a culture, no matter where you come from. Even African Americans are part of an even greater culture, which is the American culture, which is a part of another greater culture, which is Western culture, which is part of another greater culture, which is part of another greater culture. Culture, there's some people like this who are pretty, you know, whatever. I don't like being mean to people who are pretty uninformed about what the word culture means, but the word culture just means your way of life. It's not as deep as a lot of people think. The word tribe and culture are not interchangeable. The word tribe is more about a tight unit, a family, rather than, you know, a spread out culture. Also, her insulting the genres of music in America is kind of ironic, the fact that she knows what it is. Meanwhile, this guy probably doesn't know the type of music that comes from the other side. I'm guessing he knows African music. There's no way he doesn't know African music.
Don't cook her. Just let.
What do you have? What is your staple food? Nothing. So what culture? What culture?
Okay.
Of course, again, this rant is pretty bad because, of course, she's saying bad things. And I criticize people like this. That's why Modi Speaks is one of those that I criticize, because they have bad things to say about African Americans. And I don't know why.
Okay, let's break this down, family, because this is one of the number one talking points amongst these tethers. And I kind of just hinted on it, and I showed you they're so culturally relevant over there. Less than 1% of the people on Earth. Hell, we're more known on the continent of Africa than they are.
So again, this idea of a tether, I don't even know what that is. I'm guessing a tether because you tether something to something. I'm guessing he's talking about Black Africans that moved to the Americas. As he said, this person is in Africa, not in the Americas. So I don't know why she would be a tether necessarily. But he says we're more well known in America. If you're talking about tribe to tribe, but African American is not a tribe. If you mean you're more well known, as in Africans are less well known than African Americans, that is silly to assume.
Because our culture runs rampant over there. Okay, our culture runs rampant over there.
Over there in the Buganda tribe or over there in Africa, because African culture runs rampant all over the world, including within African Americans, which, if we can get into it, we can talk about how many Africans literally came from Africa within the last, 150 years and contributed to African American culture. And then, of course, the foundations of African American culture, which comes from Africa.
Fine, though, before I give you what is Black American culture, and before I give y'all some nuance on how special of a people we are and how special of a culture we created, let's define what culture is.
Well, that's a pretty good start. I will start by saying this word, no matter what definition you get, will never be accurate because the word culture is much bigger than what you think. It's like the word democracy, which most people think it's as simple. It's just you get to vote. But look at African democracies and look at American democracies. They don't even operate the same. So if you look at cultures, right, you take Zulus, right, different language groups or different tribes that form a bigger Zulu nation, which some people call the Zulu tribe, but it's a nation. It's also a tribe, but it breaks apart to different parts of South Africa, and now it's a language group. So you must be careful about what words you use. There's still one culture, just like South African culture is one culture, including blacks and whites together. American culture is also another culture, including blacks and whites. And you break it down like that. It's not as simple as people like to think it is. It's very complicated what the word culture means and its influences. And when people try to get an independent culture, that's where things start to go wrong because in order to have an independent culture with the most strictest words of what a culture is, if you try to make it exclusive, then nobody exists in that world.
Because what a lot of these disrespectful ass immigrants do, these fleers do, is they try to make this little weird, little specialized definition of what culture is.
So again, I think there's a lot of people being attacked here who are not saying anything. So he used the word tether and then he used the word fleers, but he mentioned that this woman over here is still in Africa, so she fled from nothing. Fleers, by the way, is like a derogatory word they use for people who went to America. A lot of these people who go to America from Africa have the money to go there. Sometimes they're going as a refugee, so they might not have the money, but a lot of them are in very privileged positions to go. So I think the word fleer there is probably not a good one.
And notice every time they bring up culture, they just simply talk about their tribe. Okay? But let's look up what culture is.
So, like I said, you cannot bring up tribe and culture interchangeably because tribe and culture are two completely different words. Like I said, East African culture, that's a culture. The Swahili culture exists too, which is only one part of East African culture. Then you have Central African culture, which is part of a broader equatorial culture, which is part of a broader African culture, which is part of a broader global culture. So the word culture, again, is very difficult. The definition he's about to read is a very specific one to whatever dictionary he's going to get. The word culture, if you don't know, is debated by tons of people. You can go on the internet and write what is culture debate, and you will find all kinds of people giving all kinds of definitions. Now, I know a lot of people think dictionaries give us definitions, but this is not true. Dictionaries give us usage. Usage, in other words, means what most people say the word means, which is different than trying to get a rational explanation of what a specific word means, which is kind of impossible, to be honest.
Now, as you can see, I typed in on Google at the top, what is culture? Just basic definition of culture. Okay, that's accumulation of all the sources, all the definitions that people have created over time. I said, what is culture? All right, it gave me two definitions. The first, the arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively. Okay, and the second one, which is the most common one used as it pertains to what we're talking about, the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group, family.
So, as I mentioned before, this word culture is a vague one. And the second one, which he reads, is more vague than the first. But let's break down how vague this word is. So the one at the top says the arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievements regarding collectively. Uh, Everything, basically, is what they said there. Every single thing that humans do is part of culture. It even gets worse. You can have people who say that culture is about the way you walk, talk, sleep, eat, communicate. This sentence is part of culture. So that's as vague as the word culture can get, which is why saying someone doesn't have a culture is one of the, you know, most uninformed things you can say. The second one, the customs, again, many people have customs. I mean, there are shared customs between Africans and Europeans, things that we both do that came from either side. So it's not necessarily specific arts. Again, there's shared arts between Africa and Europe as well. I'm just using these as an example of you're going to end up finding out that Europe and Africa are the same culture if you go by this definition. Social institutions, again, Europe and Africa have these social institutions, depending on what you consider social institution. But one of them, of course, would be embassies and stuff like that, schools in the way they operate, trade programs, whatever, achievements. And again, we've seen multiple achievements where Europe and Africa collectively do things. One of them is in South Africa, for example, or other parts of Africa where there's satellites, where they've mapped out the skies using these multiple satellites that are in both Europe, Africa, the Americas, everywhere, which is why there's also a global culture. But let's go with Europe and Africa to try and show you how vague this word culture is. And then it says of a particular nation. Now, this is where it gets a little difficult because now this word culture, if it's broken down to a specific nation, certain cultures won't even qualify as cultures because the Zulus aren't tied down to one nation. African Americans are not necessarily tied down to one nation either. There's African Americans all over the world. There's the Baganda tribe as well, not tied to one country. The Lua people, not tied to one country. So to say of a nation is pretty incorrect because there are cultures that transcend nations, but they give us options. People, right? So either the achievement, the customs, arts, social institutions, achievements of a particular nation. So that's one example. Two, people, which again, you can have a global culture, you can bring it down, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, social group. Again, we get vaguer and vaguer. The most one that is defined there is of a particular nation, which again, we can argue about what the word nation means.
And the example they used was Caribbean culture. All right. That's the definition of what culture is as it pertains to people, a particular fixed nation, an ethnic group, different thing.
Nope. That's a definition of the word culture. And the one you chose is a particular nation. But as you can see, even within this one, they broaden it to a people or other social groups. And of course, Caribbean culture, I think you can tell there, that's not just one nation.
Different things like that. All right. So, like I said again, they try to make culture this. Every time you start talking about culture, they start talking about their damn tribe. Or, well, I'm from the Bugandan tribe. Okay, cool. You're from the Bugandan tribe. What are their customs? What are their arts? What are their social institutions that they've created and pioneered? And most importantly, what have your ass achieved? They always stay away from this, family.
So, of course, that's a very easy question to answer. If we're talking about specifically a specific tribe, which the word culture does apply to a specific tribe, if you talk about what music they had, obviously they had the type of music that would eventually be utilized in the foundations of blues, jazz, all of these, the Buganda have. It's called percussion music, and it's a type of African music that is ubiquitous within Africa. The type of arts include ivory carvings, include constructions, include all kinds of manner of things. I mean, you can look it up: dress, cotton making, trade with different countries. If you're talking specifically about the Buganda tribe, and I'm not even talking about the modern Buganda people, which still exist. If you want to talk about their achievements, we're talking about the modern world. Then, of course, giving name to their country of Uganda. We can start there. Pioneering the free 1960 something, they got free, and then they started building buildings all over their nation. They started having transport of all kinds. Yes, there is poverty in a lot of areas, but there are cities and towns and all of that. So those are their achievements. Of course, they've got inventions, they've got all of those things within Uganda. Uh, I don't know what the problem would be with that though, but yes, the people of Uganda have achieved a lot within their own nation, and they're independent from any Europeans, so they can do whatever they want. That's one achievement.
They just mention their tribe. They just throw their tribe out there like that's culture.
They throw it out there because it applies. The word culture does apply. So if we say the customs, yeah, the Buganda people have customs. I listed a few. The arts, they've got arts. Social institutions, come on, we all know they've got social institutions. Achievements, I just mentioned a few again. So of course they're going to throw out their tribe, because the only other way to answer the question is, what do you mean? And then it's going to sound dumb. In Africa, most of the time when you talk about someone's tribe, to make it separate from the other, you're talking about your specific, if you're talking about somebody's culture, you're talking about specifically their tribe. Everybody knows that culture can be expanded greater than that, but most of the time when people are asking someone's culture, they talk about tribe, which is probably what they're talking about. Now, it says they have a particular nation, people, or other social groups. 5 people can be a culture. Did you know that? 12 people can be a culture. 3 people can be a culture.
The great Ivan Van Sertima once said that it's one thing to say where you were or you were first somewhere, but there's another thing to talk about what you did.
Well, since it's not that deep, I won't go into particular names, but within Uganda, people who belong to the Buganda tribe have done several things. Like I said, they built some great cities independently from Europe. They built some great civilizations. They've got all kinds of things that are around today, independent of Europe. And of course, they freed themselves from the Europeans, and they're still continuing to do things today. It's not like this nation has died and then now it's like just relegated to history. It's not ancient Egypt.
Okay? And see, a lot of these African tribes, they sit over here and start talking about they were first in their homeland. We were first. We've been here. We've been here. Okay, but what have you done? What have you achieved?
A whole lot. But let me just give some examples from AI. Since we're all using AI now, I don't use AI a lot. I'm not one of those people. But since we want to use AI, let's use AI, Google's AI, to give us some examples. So, for example, notable Ugandan inventor includes Sandra Nambuzo and Samuel Muyita, who created the Copelix biodegradable fruit preservation sachets, winning the 2025 European Patent Office Young Inventors Prize. Another key figure is Brian Gita, who invented the Matububa device, a bloodless malaria test that won the Africa Prize of Engineering. Other innovators include Julius Mugaga with the Lumenda device for diagnosing neonatal meningitis, and a team behind the Mamepo smart jacket for pneumonia diagnosis. Then we have a whole bunch of other inventors. This is just invention. We're not talking about their contributions to fashion or any of that stuff. We're just talking about inventing only.
Why are you culturally relevant, family? So with that being said, what is Black American culture? She was asking it in a very disrespectful tone. What is your culture, nigga? What is?
While of course she did ask it in a disrespectful tone, hearing it that way kind of tells me like where your mindset is coming from and where it's triggered from. I think it's triggered from a more European side of it, because I don't know why you think this person would say the N word to try and offend. I haven't seen it. Maybe she does it some other place, but let's carry on. I've heard African Americans call Black Africans the N word, but let's move on.
Your culture. Let me get on the big screen for this. What is Black American culture? Let's start off with our customs or our traditions, because that was the first word that they mentioned in culture.
So this is a much better way of handling this issue, which is to just state what your culture is. Yes, that's what I'm saying. Now, African Americans, like we all know, have got one of the richest cultures in the world, especially for a people who are somewhat surrounded country wise. And this is why we're probably going to see eye to eye in this point. And I'd like to add a few things about African American culture, because, you know, that's one of the things that I look at deeply.
Our customs are rooted in resiliency and unity. Things like when we greet each other, we call it giving each other dap, which means and stood for dignity and pride. DAP, dignity and pride, DAP. That DAP has gone around the world. That started with foundational Black Americans who were over there fighting in wars in Vietnam. And they wanted to show some type of cultural unity because they were in damn near segregated mesh halls. They were being mistreated compared to the white soldiers.
So, of course, there's a lot of things that people had to create within America, Black people had to create within America, that to sort of communicate within themselves. And of course, the DAP is one of them, particularly the Vietnam War, but even wars before that, African Americans, which it is a resilience culture. No one can deny that at all, because they have survived a lot. I mean, being used as the first line in some of the earlier wars that were before this, the Vietnam War, and then being, you know, mistreated in as late as the Vietnam War, and then even later than that. But, you know, that's something else. So, yes, this is a good example of African American culture.
So they say, hey, man, we got to have our cultural unity thing. We got to come up with that. Now you see these folks around the world giving handshake, giving different signs of unity. Everything we do is rooted in our survival. Things like playing the dozens, aka joning, aka cracking, aka roasting on each other, that we do from a young age in order to build our mental fortitude.
While the name is unique to the Americas, and of course I've heard about it, a lot of people have heard about it, the mama jokes and all of that. Again, very great example of African American culture, but I wouldn't say it's strictly unique to African American culture, because of course dissing each other or insulting each other in this type of way exists in Africa, exists in Europe, exists everywhere. But yes, they did have their own unique way of doing it.
Your mama's so fat, your daddy's so ugly. See, these immigrants, they come over here and they think, oh, you're so mean. No. That's rooted in foundational Black American tradition, because a part of foundational Black American tradition was you have to be mentally tough. Because our ancestors knew, hey, when these folks start talking about you, hey, when these folks start roasting, when these folks start talking about your mama, your sister, your cousin, you can't afford to get emotional and respond back, because you might get the whole Black Wall Street burned down.
While I do agree that in order to survive in the Americas, or in America as a Black person, it probably takes a lot of mental strength, because there is attacks coming from all angles. I mean, I'm not even American, and when I used to go on certain things, I'd get the same attack. Like I mentioned, even African Americans, when they go to other countries, depending on where you are, you might get the Nigerian attack or whatever. So yes, I mean, take South Africa for example. There's a lot of white people here, and there's a lot of people who, and by the way, these African countries used to have white people. Don't see now that they don't have white people that you think they always were free, there was a lot of resilience in those countries where they had to absorb a lot of punishment within their cultures as well until they basically kicked out the bad people, but and then they ran after that. But yes, I agree that it does resilience, but this attack that Africans, they don't have resilience or any of that because they're going to get talked about and they're so sensitive. Yeah, I'd be very careful about that because, I mean, first of all, the stuff that some, forget race, the stuff that some Africans have had to survive. Yeah, you can't be mentally weak. Stuff that you've talked about in some of your videos as well. I mean, we're talking about those same scams you're talking about. We're talking about kidnappings, murder, selling of kidneys. We're talking about all kinds of things. So let's not act like to survive in Africa, you have to be this, you can be this fragile person. Whereas in America, you have to be battle hardened. I mean, in one of the videos that you showed, there was people who didn't even want to get out of a car. They didn't want to get out of a car in the streets of Soweto because, yeah, it looks like that. It looks dangerous.
You did? You might get lynched. You might get your family member lynched. You might get ran out of town. So you have to be mentally tough. So what did we do? We started practicing. We start saying derogatory things about each other to get your mental game up. Okay, get your mental fortitude up. That's where roasting and joning comes from. We carry that tradition to this day. So when they come over here, they're not used to that because many of them, unfortunately, are mentally broken down and mentally weak.
I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of black people who come from Africa and they just simply join the culture. That's what I've seen. I mean, not all of them, but there's a lot of them. Now, obviously, the type of people, again, who are coming from Africa, who have the money to afford to come to the Americas, that's a very different type of person. You can say they're weak if you want, but let's see how tough you are. Give up everything you have and move to one of the slums in Africa and live there for 10 years and see how strong you are.
So when we use simple things like African booty scratcher, they start crying and whining about it till they're 40 damn years old. Talking about, man, when I was in school, they called me an African booty scratcher. But that shows that you're mentally weak. You can't handle nothing.
So since this is a nice video from my point of view, I'm not going to point out the irony of someone making a 1-hour video about somebody insulting their nation, saying that they are not mentally weak. I mean, the person who is insulting you has obviously got you enraged, which I agree with. I think you should be enraged with it. I think you should cover yourself, but to some degree, a level of disrespect cannot be accepted. Which, of course, an African booty scratcher, which sounds funnier than you think to me, is like one of the dumbest things. Well, I don't even know what that means. African booty scratcher sounds like a type of product that you would buy, but maybe that's like highly offensive in America. I've heard it before. Don't get me wrong. I've definitely heard someone like Godfrey say it, but I think it's probably more offensive if you're surrounded by people saying it all the time.
But we should have known that because you're descendant of fleers. But this is part of our customs and traditions. We're baptized in fire.
Again, this speaks to the disjointed attack, repellent attack. This person is not a fleer. You said they're from the Buganda tribe and they're in Uganda right now. So what does that have to do with the fleers? You're just attacking fleers for no reason, quote unquote. You could call them fleers if you want. It's just people moving, but fleers or whatever.
Baptized in resiliency. You dig? We're brought up to be mentally tough, not just physically tough, but mentally tough as well. Our culture is rooted in unity. It's rooted in family. Things like and concepts like the family reunion was started by foundational Black Americans coming out of enslavement. Family reunion wasn't a thing for these other folks. They didn't have no damn family reunion.
Well, firstly, this speaks to I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly what he means by family reunion. If he means a family reuniting after slavery, you must not know anything about Africa. You know that even the Buganda tribe, for example, but Africa in general had slaves within Africa who then had to be reassembled or re-put into their previous families. But they had all kinds of reunions from before that. I mean, the idea, let's get it out of the way. There was slavery in Africa, right? And when it ended, there were a lot of people who found themselves lost and had to be put back into the appropriate cultural and traditional and tribal peopleage. This includes people who went to foreign countries, which, if you know anything about the Kingdom of Congo, they did this several times, where people who were slaves were bargained for and brought back. This also happened in West Africa, where some of the slaves were taken to North Africa and then they were bargained for by West African leaders and brought back to West Africa. Nobody knows about that history, of course, because everybody just believes West Africans just had slaves and didn't care.
Even if you look at these other cultures now, when they leave and flee their homeland, they damn near never go back. They damn near never go back. They ain't seen some of their damn mamas and cousins in 10, 15 years. They might see them on Facebook. They might see them on Instagram. You dig?
Well, actually, a lot of these people do go back. And in fact, a lot of time they don't need to go back because it's one person and they are providing the money for the people living in that country. And if they go back, the amount of money they earn is going to drop compared. So they don't need to necessarily go back. But, this is one of those things where it's like, you can show example. So for example, let's take Europeans, right? How many Europeans have migrated to Africa in the last 10 years? According to statistics, it's around about 40 million people. Do you think those people were fleeing Europe to go to Africa? If so, then you must agree that there is something that is very, 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 very interesting going on in Africa. But like I say, you can see estimates the number of Europeans who have migrated to Africa in the past decade is challenging due to limited and inconsistent data. However, we can infer some insight based on available information. Total African migrant population in 2020, Africa hosted approximately 40.6 million international migrants, accounting for 14.5% of the global migrant population. So were they fleeing to America, to Africa? Is Africa a flee destination? If we continue to read, it says European migrants in Africa, while specific numbers are not readily available, it's reasonable to assume that a portion of these 40.6 million migrants are from Europe, given historical ties, economic opportunities, and development projects. Many Europeans have relocated to various African countries over the years. This is the last 10 years, by the way. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of using ChatGPT, but there you have it.
But we had a culture, a tradition of family reunion that, hey, man, once we got out of slavery, we got to get the family back together. That's a cultural tradition that was started by foundational Black Americans.
And it's a beautiful culture. It's actually a beautiful story to a very scary beginning. I mean, to be able to come back and reunite people within their belonging areas, that's powerful in my opinion, but I don't know why it should be used to insult people. Now again, I'm aware that she started it, but
things like honor and respect. It was foundational Black Americans in South Carolina who created and started Memorial Day, honoring the troops. Let's honor our fallen soldiers. These are some of our customs. These are some of our traditions. Hey, that brother, that sister laid down their lives so we can be here right now today. It was foundational Black Americans, over 10,000 strong in South Carolina, that said, hey, we need to honor these fallen soldiers who are buried in these unmarked graves.
Again, another very powerful statement of African American culture. And by the way, obviously he's not talking to me. So obviously to that girl, yep, this is a video that she should watch. to understand that what she's talking about is nonsense. Now, Do I think that she will care about this video? Probably not as much as I do, but yes, this is a very interesting thing to say about, how African Americans could unite and create very interesting and very powerful uh, social organizations that could heal some of the damages that have been done, including making sure the right people are buried in perfect spots. Now, of course, in Africa, the same thing happened, but let's not even compare.
And they held a parade. That parade later on morphed into Memorial Day, honoring of the troops. It was foundational Black Americans who honored their ancestors through spiritual practices and systems like hoodoo, okay, which often gets confused with voodoo. That was our spiritual systems that we created.
Again, of course, another important thing, religion is very important. I would also include there the African American church, Christian church, and also African American Muslims and stuff like that inside of this. But yes, hoodoo is unique compared to voodoo in terms of where they come from, but hoodoo does come from African spiritual ideas, which were then changed or implemented differently due to the extra Christian and extra Western ideas that were put inside of that area. But it does have its origins within Africa.
Concepts like Sunday dinner, concepts like soul food. We are people of soul. Okay? So we said, hey man, Sunday dinner, we're going to get around the table and we're going to eat this soul food because it's good for our soul. Because we are soul people. Okay? That's why we called each other soul man and soul brother at one point in time. Because we understand we're people of the soul. One of the purest souls on earth you ever going to meet is foundational Black Americans.
Again, this is the social aspect of it, which again, I think answers the question for it. Now, I think using the word soul is interesting, but of course, I would disagree that they're more spiritual or soulful than Africans. I would put them on the same level because obviously, but let's just move on from this. I want to say that yes, these are great points to bring up to show that African Americans have culture. Now we could go way deeper than this because African American culture is very deep and it's probably one of the most documented cultures of the African diaspora or diaspora.
We done seen it all, we done done it all, and we still walking with our head held high. And this is just to scratch the surface. Foundational Black American customs and tradition is education, is free education for all. It was foundational Black Americans who, coming out of enslavement, okay, cut their illiteracy rate in half within a span of 30 years.
So yes, that is another part of it, which is very interesting. I mean, another part of people coming out of slavery. It's interesting how many people came out of slavery and became instantly successful. I forgot, but there was a woman who started companies as soon as she got out of slavery. There's a boxer as well who got out of slavery and became internationally known. There's a whole bunch of people from the Americas who came out of slavery and became successful at the time,
who went from not being able to read, not being able to write, to damn near half of our population being literate in 30 years. It was during that time that foundational Black Americans, especially in the South, gave birth to the free public school system. There was no such thing as free public schools. Everybody had to go to private schools. That's how the Ivy League started. The Ivy Leagues were private schools. You had, school was for the super rich.
Which is kind of a sad thing if you consider the fact that education is not as widespread for African Americans as it is than other groups in America, considering how much of a role they played in building the initial schools inside of their country, especially those that separated from the haves and the have-nots. Now, of course, I know the other side of the history of America and how their schools worked, but we'll talk about that another day.
Okay, but it was foundational Black Americans who said, hey man, coming out of here, we're going to have these freedmen schools. and we're going to educate our babies so that the next generation, they know how to read. They know how to write with the best in the world. And it was white folks who got jealous and said, hell, we need a free public school system. It's these Negroes running circles around my little Timothy.
I'm glad the attention is brought back to white people, because they're starting to get, overly trying to downplay Black Africans. So yes, it's white people who copied it. Then that's good. That means they contributed a lot.
Who can't read and write, and he's white. Okay, we helped give birth to that during the Reconstruction era in the South. So those are just a few of our customs and traditions. But let's go to the next word. We're going to break this down point by point, family. The second word in that definition of what culture was arts.
So before he moves on to arts, I want to state this, and this is not to do comparison or anything like that. I just want to state this. So as an independent country, Africa is solely responsible for some of the educational institutions that have been there. For example, universities like this one, high schools, primary schools, all of those, which again, there's disparities. There's some where they're for the poor and things aren't going well. And then there's the ones for rich, and some of these people end up in international schools from around the world, and some of them become great leaders of their country. The story of getting education and reducing the literacy rate and all this other stuff in Uganda is long, but I want him to continue on what he's talking about. Now, obviously, in South Africa, it's way higher, the number of people who can read and write, but let's not talk about that.
What is our arts? What is Black American culture as it pertains to arts? Oh, well, that's the art form that you couldn't keep out your mouth. That's things like hip-hop. But remember, hip-hop, they love to try to reduce our culture to hip-hop. They're not like us. That's your culture? Yeah, that's a piece of our culture that you can't keep out your mouth, even though you're hating on it because of how influential it is. But remember, hip-hop is one of the fruits from our musical tree. That ain't nowhere near the stump or the root.
Now, the funny part is that hip-hop culture is part of African culture as well, especially in the recent world, since in the 60s, there was about a contribution coming in that came directly from Africa through people like Philip Glass and people like that, who added African drumming or African percussionist music inside of the American thing that then took off in forms of like disco and all kinds of genres that even went as far as Japan. I didn't even know this until I looked into stuff like Kraftwerk, and I forgot the other group that's in Japan. Kraftwerk is in Europe, I think, but then the other one is in Japan where they used it. Not to mention, of course, things like Sega Genesis and all these other things that also used African percussionist music as their base, because they couldn't use normal music in that type of early video game culture. And this adds to the giant flow that would be American or African American music. And we all know it has African roots. So for that girl to insult it is actually hilarious, because she, in a way, she's insulting her own culture.
See, the root is things like the blues. That's FBA culture. The jazz, country music, funk, rhythm and blues, rock and roll, gospel.
Again, this is a pretty deep history. Now, I've got a whole video about where these music genres originated and how they connect with Africa. Obviously, there's probably something more to say about the African Americans who gave contributions, personal contributions. Since he hasn't said anything about Africa yet, I don't need to talk about the connections between these two. But yes, these genres are part of African American culture in terms of arts.
And many, many more. All that have impacted and influenced the world, including your music. Remember, the most popular music genre coming out the continent of Africa right now is Afro beats with an S. which is a spinoff of Afrobeat that was created by Fela Kuti.
So I'm glad he mentioned the influence. And while it is absolutely true that American music has come back to Africa after coming from Africa and re-influenced and reinvigorated a lot of the culture that would later become very useful in modern genres of Africa, which is basically how music works, by the way. While this is true, African music has influenced African American music as well. In fact, African music, a lot of people who live in the English world, they think that African music has only influenced African American music, but I've shown you from Iran the Ethiopian music that influenced the Middle East. I've shown you from North Africa the type of music that influenced the sort of Iberian music, the Moorish music that you would hear there. Obviously, in South America, the Mamba, all of these dances that we know, the music and the dances that are over there. So Africa has influenced many, 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 many genres around the world, and it continues to do it to this day. Does it have influences from African American culture? Absolutely. That's because African music is very addictive. That's why African Americans utilized it in their early music, even though they were surrounded by European music. And that's why they utilized it later when they wanted to find a new genre in the 60s, when the percussionist movement or the minimalistic music, which is what the era of music that we live in today, was used. People like Boney M or any of these people that you can pick, all of them, they have some root within Africa, which is why you get names like Africa Bambaataa and stuff like that, where a lot of these people, they acknowledge the African root and even specific African people, if we can get into that depth. So if we're talking about Fela Kuti is a little different than the type of beat songs that people talk about. So a lot of people like to group African music, especially as like Afrobeat, which Afrobeat is a type of music in Nigeria, which is only one area of Africa. And yes, that is true that Afrobeat does come with Fela Kuti and stuff like that, but that is only one section. Of course, East Africa has its own version as well, and all of these other places have their own version of popular music. The South African popular music, which a lot of people mistakenly put into Afrobeat, saying that it's inspired by Fela Kuti, is not. It's inspired by house music, which is another genre that comes from the Americas, but it is inspired by house music, which house music was inspired by African drumming. And this type of music went and expanded into Africa, and then they continue to create their own genre within it. So the idea that it's this one specific person, it's not true.
Remember where Fela Kuti got it from. Okay, let's go in our receipt bag again.
I mean, I hate to be this guy, but I got to, just in case this correction is appreciated, it's Fela Kuti, not Fela Kuti.
Okay. And this is from a New York Times article that was put out in 1977 called Nigeria's Dissident Superstar, talking about Fela Kuti. And let's scroll down, family. And boy, the ancestors, and boy, it just started raining out of nowhere in Atlanta. That's the ancestors rejoicing for this straightening that we're doing.
But I am glad, by the way, that he's bringing up Fela Kuti, which is a person who is from Africa. It tells me that he doesn't have animosity around normal Africans who don't have bad things to say about Africa, because there's a difference between isolating yourselves and identifying yourselves. So identifying yourselves is fine and going, we are this group, but isolating yourself and saying we have nothing to do with the other groups, that's a little different.
They're rejoicing for this straightening that we're doing. Now, this is what the New York Times article says. Follow with me now. A flamboyant musician named Fele mixes radical politics with pidgin English in songs so explosive the government has banned his performance.
Now you know you're talking about some real stuff when the government bans your music, especially if you're the type of person who would be this influential in the future, meaning that even with the ban, it has gone beyond all of that. This, of course, can sum up a lot of people in the past, but that tells you, I mean, just becoming a musician is probably one of the hardest things in the world, which is why most parents discourage it. But becoming a musician, getting banned, and then being influential in the future, that's a next level.
Okay? It goes into his life story. And as you can see, I wasn't lying. It's really raining out here. Really storming out here. You dig? But I'm not going to close the window. I'm going to keep it open because that's the ancestors rejoicing right now. Okay? It says, then he went to England to study at the London School of Music, where he was exposed to American jazz and fell under the spell of Charlie Parker, FBA, Johnny Coltrane, and Miles Davis. FBA brothers, okay? By combining the bouncy high life and American jazz, he invented Afrobeat, a new sound. All right. Yeah.
Which is something you can say about most musicians, even the ones that didn't go to school, because there's a lot of musicians who didn't finish school but would still pick up these trends of jazz and American music. You can't really find musicians today who will be successful and do not pick up any African American culture.
Dig? It goes on to say the turning point of his career seems to have come after his visit to the United States in 1969. In San Francisco, he met Sandra Isidore, a young woman on the fringes of the Black Panther movement, who gave him books to read and introduced him to men who were stirring crowds with radical rhetoric. Okay, he got around some of that FBA revolutionary energy,
which embraced him even though it was African. And because they embraced him, they got a much more powerful thing going as well, because if they had just hid it for themselves and said this is strictly for FBAs, then no one outside of their own groups would have even heard of them or even cared to go deep into their realities. And
it says there were long discussions into the dawn about white oppression, colonialism, and revolution. He became politically aware. He got his consciousness from foundational Black Americans, soaking up that game from us. All right. And this is the most powerful statement because she's sitting up here questioning our culture. She's sitting up here what culture do you have, nigga?
Okay, good. I'm glad he's addressing her particularly, because that's who needs to be attacked in this video, not the general Africans who have nothing to do with this and are not part of whatever growing movement there is on TikTok or whatever that is insulting African Americans.
Oh, ma'am, I'm going to let one of your Africans say it. He said that it was incredible how my head was turned. Everything fell into place, man. Dele says, for the first time, I saw the essence of Blackism, aka Black nationalism. It's crazy in the States. People think Black Power movement drew inspiration from Africa. All these Americans come over here looking for awareness.
So, of course, he's talking about his own personal experience. But even within his personal experience, he gives us a clue of what I was talking about earlier, which is the mixture of both African and African American culture. Listen to what he said. He said, people come over here, talk about Africa for awareness, meaning that he is saying the people he saw were going to Africa to get aware. So how he feels is one thing, and that's fine. But clearly, a lot of these people saw Africa as a place to get knowledge from, too.
They don't realize they're the ones who got it over there.
And of course, they did have it over there, and nobody's going to dispute that, at least not me. But something they also have is the smartness to go to Africa to try and pick up more ways of becoming African, which is going to be mentioned in the next sentence.
He said, while we were even ashamed to go around in national dress until we saw pictures of blacks wearing dashikis on 125th Street. I'll stop right there.
So again, I don't want to downplay this musician's personal experience, but Africans have always been wearing traditional dress, and a dashiki is only one version of that. But it's telling what he's saying, that they had to go to Africa and go get dashikis to influence themselves as well. So clearly there's a mixture that's going on over here. And that's, again, the important thing about African Americans and Africans, which is the bigger your group, the more likely you are to succeed in this world, at least.
Okay, I'll stop right there. And I didn't even get into our dances that we created. I didn't even get into our arts like the Harlem Renaissance, like graffiti. That's one of the elements of hip hop that was created by foundational Black Americans in Philadelphia by the name of Cornbread. I didn't even get into that. That's light work.
I would have appreciated if you got into it, because I like African American culture and I like learning about it. And of course, I know that there's hip hop, graffiti, breakdancing. There's all kinds of elements of hip hop that maybe not all of it has made it. DJing, not all of it has made it as far into this as it can. Now, I'm not claiming that every part of hip hop was influenced by Africa. It's mainly the music and the dances that have been influenced, but we'll get back to that.
Okay, that's our arts, but it's more to the definition of what culture is. It also goes on to say that culture is just social institutions that you build. Okay, we created institutions for higher learning, our own place of education. We call them HBCUs, or historically Black colleges, from Lincoln to Howard to FAMU to Jackson State.
See, this is the type of stuff that I like to learn now. Unfortunately for me, I would have liked if this was the first time I've heard of this, but I've already heard of historically Black colleges, and I've also heard of FAMU and all these other specific places. One of the ways that I learned about them, of course, is that they have performers perform at the end of the year, and sometimes I go and check and I go and watch, because they put them online, some performances in these schools, and I go and these things are very interesting if you like learning about culture and stuff like that, to see a deeper way. And then you can hear from particular individuals from within the school what they think their history is, because sometimes history is told through one direction and you might miss something.
To Cheney and many, many, many more, over 100 of them here in the United States, that not only gave birth to some of our great leaders, but gave birth to some of your revolutionaries, like the Kwame Nkrumahs. Remember, Kwame Nkrumah went to Lincoln University. Kwame Nkrumah was over there in Harlem and places like that on 125th Street during those college summers, soaking up that game. He took that energy back and became the first independent president of Ghana.
Which, by the way, speaks to the intelligence of Kwame Nkrumah himself, because Kwame studied first in Akimota College in Ghana, as you can see there. Then he went to Lincoln University. Then he went to the University of Pennsylvania, United States. And then he went to the London School of Economics and earned multiple degrees, as you can see. This, again, speaks to the intelligence of this one individual. He did get a lot of education inside of America, but it can't be ignored that he got a lot of it from Africa. It can't be ignored that he got a lot of it from Europe as well. But I understand his point, and I agree with it, in fact. But this is what I'm talking about when I say the unification is stronger than the division. Now, I hope he wouldn't call Kwame Nkrumah a flea when he went to America.
Other people like Nnamdi Azikiwe, okay, the first president of Nigeria, who went to Lincoln University and Howard University, okay, got up under foundational Black Americans, took that type of energy back home and became the first president in his damn independent country. You dig? Those
again speaks to the intelligence of this one individual, and of course I don't doubt that he took a lot of his influences from America and brought them back to Africa. But also it must be said that both of these people were somewhat privileged in order to be able to go to the Americas. Just in general, there was something there that was much bigger going on than just learning something from the Americas.
Those are the social institutions that we pioneered and we created, and we made it possible for you to go to. Institutions and organizations that we created, like SNCC, okay, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that helped fight for civil rights. You dig? The NAACP and many, many others, CORE, that helped to fight for our civil rights, so that you can come here, you can tether off of us, and you can get the tangible and benefits that they fought and died for.
Again, the influence goes both ways. As you know, a lot of people from African Americans have used these two individuals as well to learn from on how to organize in the Americas as well. And of course, people like Nelson Mandela as well, or any of these African leaders who learned from anywhere around the world, and then they became influential themselves. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about the combination rather than the separation.
Those are just a few of our social institutions and organizations, but wait, there is more. Because most importantly, the thing that they are afraid to mention about culture, it says the last thing is achievements. What have you achieved? Oh, I couldn't wait for this one.
I mean, if you want to know exactly what Africans have achieved, all you need to do is look at some of the cities that Africans have built. Now, I'm not claiming there's no wealth problems where you can find very broken areas, but the places that have been achieved have 100% been achieved. I saw him talking about how in some places they show rich areas and then they don't show poor areas, which is fine. But all I'm showing you right now is that these Black African run cities, this is Lusaka, these Black African run cities show all the achievements that we have made. I mean, is this not success? We're talking about people doing things completely independently from the Europeans. And then, of course, if we use AI, we can find all kinds of inventors in Africa. I got bored just looking at some of the names. We're talking about medicine, engineering, arts, music, whatever, pick anything, the internet. I mean, the internet, Africans have been involved in that since the very beginning, which we don't even need to talk about. Now, again, this is not competition. I know a whole bunch of African Americans have been involved in those too. I definitely know a person who used to be part of Apple as well, who's an African American. Again, I picked various countries that you already mentioned. I could pick any country in Africa, but I just picked the ones that you mentioned, like Uganda, Nigeria, Ghana. There's a whole bunch of inventors who've won all kinds of international prizes for their inventions. Sure, they didn't win Nobel prizes, but those are hard to get anyway.
Oh, let me get right. I couldn't wait for this one. What is Black American culture? They say culture is your achievements. They ended with that. Oh man, what have Black Americans achieved? Number one, our ethnogenesis. We broke the shackles and chains of enslavement. We ended slavery. We fought and won in the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln said on 5 different occasions, we could not have won this war without the Negro.
which is an important point, but I'll also point out that African Americans played a huge role in, firstly, before they called it America, and America in general, and in the building of the much larger population, and how they would contribute internationally because of some of the stuff they were doing, including inventions that were built by both slaves and freemen. Because some people forget that there were free people in America. Some of them, let's not even talk about that. But yeah, there were all kinds of contributions by African Americans in the world.
You dig? We freed ourselves. Then after we freed ourselves, we went on to fight and stand on business to get our civil rights. You dig? We won civil rights in this country. And meanwhile, during that time period, while we're stumping, we're breaking the chains of enslavement, we're fighting for our civil rights, we're building Black Wall Streets across this country, not just the one in Tulsa, okay? But from Tulsa to Rosewood, Florida, to Edenville, Florida, to the Villa down in Jacksonville, Florida, to the Ville up in St. Louis, Missouri, to Jackson Ward in Virginia. You dig? To Durham out there in North Carolina, to Auburn Avenue right here where I'm at in Atlanta, Georgia. We built metropolises across this country, Black business centers. We did what y'all can't seem to do in Africa to no consistent scale, even though that you're 99.9% of the damn population.
So I didn't interrupt it earlier because everything he was saying made a lot of sense. But until he got to the point where he said, apparently Africans didn't create any metropolises. But we all know that Africans have a bunch of metropolises inside of the African continent. And these areas obviously speak to a number of historical contributions by the people living in those areas. And yes, you're right, 99.99 in some places in Africa, which is why they did this. Now, if you count the population, there's a difference, right? There's about 50 million African Americans. So this is the part where I think the Eurocentric mind play comes in, where Africa is portrayed as like this area that has no cities, that has no nothing like that, which is weird. We've got airports, we've got all kinds of things, which, you know, it's kind of weird to say. I mean, how do people get in and out? Kind of strange. But if you let's count, first of all, there's about 125,000 millionaires in Africa. And of course, in Africa, there's 1.5 billion people. So you're talking about a much bigger project that needs to be done. And of course, we're battling with things in a greater way. Not to mention that most African countries haven't been free until like the 60s. So you're talking about a much shorter range of time. If you take 50 million, right, which is the population of America, and then you expand it to Africa, there's about 50 million people in Africa who would fit the Americas, who are living a pretty equivalent life to that of people who are part of the African American population. So achievement to achievement, you know, it's pretty much the same.
Where you live. And even after they burned them down, we build them up again. We build them up again, which gave birth to the $1.8 trillion of spending power that we have. What have we achieved? We have masters inventors that come from our Black American heritage and lineage. People like Garrett Morgan, who created those traffic lights that you see in your homeland, who created the gas mask that's probably part of every fire station in the world. People like Lewis Latimer, who created the filament for the light bulb. People like Maria Van Braun, who created the home security system that you use to lock up your house because you're so afraid of your damn tribe and your homeland. That's why you had to flee.
It always starts off good and then it ends up bad, which is, again, I mean, if you want to talk about fleeing, how many of these people in Africa have fled or are just living in Africa? tons of people are just living in Africa. And then, secondly, although all of those people are great inventors, which I have personally mentioned and even detailed which parts of their invention and their patents, I mean, some of them you've sort of given, let's say, false information about their contributions, like Lewis Latimer, for example, who's probably one of my favorite inventors. But a lot of these people, I have detailed their history, and I think their achievements are well done. Now, if you think no inventors in Africa have contributed to alarm systems, it's kind of funny. If you think no inventors in Africa have contributed to any of these things, I mean, I could sit here and list them if you want, but it sounds boring, to be honest. And of course, I'm only saying this to defend because we're being attacked to some degree, which is, do you really think that invention stopped in like the 30s and then no one contributed anything else towards these inventions? I mean, a lot of the people that you mentioned are from a long time ago. And again, they're some of my favorite inventors, but so many things have been invented. Some that I've already listed a few, which again is a few. Believe it or not, inventions are coming out from every part of the world every single day, everywhere. But of course, you never hear about them because they're not on TV all the time. Therefore, there's no achievements.
People like Frederick McKinley Jones, who revolutionized the food industry with his first refrigerated truck, so that your food can stay cold from one destination to another, so you can have that bush meat on time in Sweden.
I never even heard of the word bushmeat, and now all of a sudden it's an insult. And yes, of course, there are African American contributors to stuff like that. Of course, there's many people contributed to the fridge. Let's not pretend it's one person. But this is, in my opinion, not a good way of expressing it. Yes, they did invent these, and I've presented them before, but to attack Africans and say they eat bushmeat all the time, do you really think that that's what's happening? You should probably chat GPT where most people in Africa get their food from.
Sisters like Gladys Mae West, who helped invent GPS, so you can get from one destination to another flawlessly. And many, many others, family. Put some of our inventors in the comments section. They rejoice when you do that. Put some of our inventors. I can go on and on and on.
And I would like to go on and on and on. Unfortunately, I've heard of all of the ones that you mentioned, and I've got a video on my channel called Black Inventions, which speaks about these African American inventions. Luckily for America, they had a documentation level which wasn't stolen by white people and then thrown away, like a lot of the black inventions in Africa. But there's new inventions that we've been inventing in the last 30 years, which have played a role in international technologies, including ones used by Apple in them, but you probably don't know anything about them. And these people who have played this role, I mean, you know that Nigerians are some of the people who end up in America and contribute to these. Of course, there's a bunch of people from all kinds of countries, including Asia, who contribute into America's technology field, which is, I hope, something that you would acknowledge too.
So when you speak on what is Black American culture, all you got to know is it's the premier culture. And I'm going to say this right now, and I don't care how people feel about it. It's only one culture in history that can maybe give us a run for our money as foundational Black Americans. Only one, and that's the ancient Egyptians. That's the only culture who can maybe give us a run for our money. Other than that, we wash all of y'all culture.
So let's talk about influence, of course. African culture has inspired Middle Eastern music from Yemen, Saudi Arabia, all of these places with music genres that most people in the West have never even heard of. Then, of course, it inspired European music that a lot of people have never heard of. And then it inspired African American music, which is the genre he's talking about. So no matter what influence African American culture has, that just goes under the umbrella of African culture. So to say that it's the premier culture is like saying African culture is the premier culture because it's the underlyings of African American culture, which again, you know this because how many of these Africans were fetched in the last 100 years? I'm not even talking about whatever back then, in the last 100 years, were fetched who contribute into the music that happens inside of America, that happens in the technology, that happens in the arts. It's not, again, Africa versus African American. I think it's just that's the same thing in a way. Obviously, African American culture is not necessarily African culture, but a lot of African American culture is African culture, which then pours back and forth within each other and then becomes a greater thing. Now, it's kind of interesting that he says the one culture that can rival the African American culture is ancient Egyptian culture. But the obvious question would be, where are the ancient Egyptians now? Now, of course, I love ancient Egypt. Everybody knows that I care about ancient Egypt. But the contributions of ancient Egypt, although they span throughout the ages and all of that, are, guess what? African, right? So if you take African culture and you compare it to American culture, taking the one that you said rivals your culture, so take Egyptian culture, take West African culture, East African culture, Southern African culture, Central African culture, the cultures in the Middle East, African American culture, Jamaican culture, and a whole Afro-Brazilian culture, and then compare that to African American culture. There simply is no comparison. But this is not to compare. It's an offshoot of African culture and it's doing pretty well. Now, of course, I mean, it's not lost on me that hip hop and stuff like that have dominated the world in a way. But again, this domination comes from borrowings from Africa.
If you want to play this game of culturalist, if you want to play that game, we wash everybody's culture. You did? Because all we've done is achieve, innovate, and keep our head up high and keep our moral dignity and principles in doing it.
Which is good, but has no real need to attack anybody else's culture. I'm not even going to do the competition really about whose culture is more influential than others. I mean, as much as I like African culture, I mean, I can't pretend like there's no cultures outside of these that were pretty dominant in history. I mean, the Chinese had a run, people in the Middle East had a good run, people in Japan had a run. All of these places have had a pretty good run in culture.
You dig? We are the culture. We are Black Americans. But let's continue back to the video.
We don't quote Martin Luther King. We quote Nelson Mandela. It is you who flock Africa coming to look for him. You'll be flocking Ghana.
I forgot how weird some of the stuff that this girl was saying because we were so focused on him. So it is pretty weird to say this, especially given the fact that Nelson Mandela was inspired by Martin Luther King Jr. and also other African Americans and people like Mahatma Gandhi and other activists from the past.
Nigeria looking for those ancient slave markets, and now all of a sudden you don't want to be attached to slavery because your ancestors were lied to with a piece of candy and they left.
When this is all done, I'm going to give my opinion about why this is even happening, but I am very confused about why this is happening. Why is she saying what she is saying? And of course, some of the things that he's saying, I'm not very happy about. Looking up to your culture and saying that you've got a good culture, that's pretty cool. I think everybody should do that. But downgrading other people's homeland, I think that's pretty bad. And they're both doing it, to be honest.
I know ancestors. I know. Boy, it's raining like hell outside. Boy, they want me to do some straightening so bad. I got you, ancestors. Lord. Number one, she said that we don't quote Dr. King. We quote Nelson Mandela. You dumb bimbo. Oh, Lord, you dumb bimbo. Mandela was quoting Dr. King. Mandela was quoting Dr. King. In two of the biggest speeches of his life, he started quoting Dr. King. Okay, you don't believe me? Let's go here.
Damn. This whole thing is getting out of hand.
Okay, now, family, this is Nelson Mandela accepting his Nobel Peace Prize. I believe this was in 94, 93, 94. I can't remember exactly. And this is him. He's going to start mentioning and quoting Dr. King.
It will not be presumptuous of us if we also add, among our predecessors, the name of another outstanding Nobel Peace Prize winner, the late African-American statesman and internationalist, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.
Okay. Oh, Lord. Okay, let us continue.
He too grappled with and died in the effort to make a contribution to the just solution of the same great issues of the day, which we have had to face as South Africans. Let the strivings of us all prove Martin Luther King Jr. to have been correct when he said that humanity can no longer be tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war.
He's quoting Dr. King.
That was absolutely brilliant, and that was a good one that he threw out there. And this is the type of response that I wanted more than the other one. So clearly, there you go. You have the evidence. It's fixed, and there it is. The name calling kind of, a bit too far.
He's pulling from Dr. King's speeches.
Let the efforts of us all prove that he was not a mere dreamer when he spoke of the beauty of the genuine brotherhood and peace being more precious than diamonds or silver or gold. Let a new age be born. Thank you.
All right.
So already this video is very long. I think I'm going to need a part 2 to address the final part of this video.
Number 2, she also tried to be slick, and she tried to mention y'all running over here. Man, foundational Black Americans ain't running nowhere. Let's be clear. We ain't running nowhere. They always try to hype up like we're moving to Africa in droves. We're not moving to nowhere in droves, family. We're not moving nowhere in droves. Even places like Ghana, they always act like there's so many Black Americans moving to Ghana. Ghana only has about 15,000 Black Americans, people of Black American descent. Now, you compare that to how many Africans we got over here.
So, of course, the only populations in the world is not just African Americans and Africans. As I mentioned before, at least 23 million people coming from overseas have landed up in Africa. These people, of course, come with money, just like the Africans that moved to America. At least a good number of them come with money. Others are refugees, of course, who come from the Middle East and other places and end up in Africa. This contribution shows you that there are, I don't even know why this part is not obvious, but there are obviously great parts of Africa which a lot of people want to go to. A lot of retirees, once I got to the numbers, about 1.5 million Europeans have come in as well, and a good chunk of them are retirees who retire in Africa. Now, I want you to think about that.
You dig? It's millions of them. Let's be clear. We got a very, very small number, and the people who are going over there to Africa already.
This is why they get experts to do numbers, because of course there's such a thing as proportions, which is there's 1.5 billion Africans, there's 50 million African Americans. We don't expect 100 million African Americans to end up in Africa. There's not that many of them.
They're going over there with a bag, so it's not like they're coming over there begging and pleading. They just going over there. You dig? They already have a bag. That's more like a celebrity thing. That's more so like a just kind of like a symbolic type thing. Many of them folks don't even stay over there all year.
Which, of course, Africans never do, right? They all just move to America and stay there and never return. Well, I can't even think of one African who goes there because they have money and they keep going back and forth. By the way, you could do your own research on that. You can write like 100 African celebrities who are celebrities right now in America who keep going back and forth between Africa. In fact, some of their families have been doing this for a while.
They go over there for 6 months and then they be back over here. Okay? And like I say, just look on YouTube. You can find hundreds of videos of people talking about they moved to Ghana and they came their ass right back. All right? Let's be clear. Ain't nobody running to Africa like that. That's a lie. See, that's a projection. They're the ones fleeing their homeland. Now they want to project that fleeing image onto us. No, we ain't fleeing. We ain't fleeing like that. That's minuscule. Most foundational Black Americans don't even know nobody living in Africa.
Well, it depends what the word know means, but even that doesn't matter. I don't understand why it matters if they know somebody living in Africa. I mean, most Africans don't know anybody living in America either. At least know, if you mean know by actually know them, like we know that guy over there, rather than some guy they saw on TV, because I'm sure every African American has seen at least one African person on TV.
At all. Number 3, she tried to lie and start ashamed of slavery. No. We're not ashamed of our ancestors who were on those plantations. Their strength, their unity, their ability to survive is the reason why we're here today. That created our beautiful ethnogenesis. That gave birth to our culture that I just explained. We're not ashamed of that. Okay, ma'am? And she also at the end tried to throw in a little slick, because they got tricked out with a piece of candy and they ended up on a ship. They love to romanticize what happened during the slave trade in order to shield their involvement.
So I'm just going to state it up front. Of course, Africans were involved in the slave trade, but they weren't just involved in the transatlantic slave trade or even the Indian Ocean slave trade. They were also involved in internal slave trades, which is why some of the countries became extremely rich, rivaling, say, some of the other countries in the world, which is why the Europeans wanted to carve them up, because they had immense wealth. Since you were talking about what did they achieve, they had immense wealth. They had ridiculous amounts of wealth, which is what happens when you sell slaves.